Order. Order. Sharon Hodgson to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Ms Furness. It's an honour to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. And it's such a delight to see such a well-attended debate, and the gallery is packed. As you will appreciate, this is a very, very important topic that we're going to be debating this afternoon. So I beg to move that this House has considered the first anniversary of the Hughes report on valproate and pelvic mesh. I also want to say that last month marked the one-year anniversary of the publication of the Hughes report, and thanks to this we now understand the how in terms of what potential compensation schemes for women and children impacted by mesh and valproate scandals could look like. And can I briefly break convention to say how grateful I am for the passion and hard work of our wonderful Patient Safety Commissioner, Henrietta Hughes, who is, who hasn't managed to get into the gallery today. Somebody might want to say there's a spare chair there if we can, somebody wants to get up and go out and make sure that she is allowed in, because she is the Patient Safety Commissioner and she is the one that we are discussing the report. Yes, there she is. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I will say again, the hard work, I want to thank the passion and hard work of our wonderful Patient Safety Commissioner, who has thankfully now been let into the room. And likewise, it is great to see so many key campaigners here who have been a great help and a source of expertise and support to me over many, many years. In particular, Kath Sansom from Sling the Mesh and Janet Williams and Emma Murphy from Infact, as well as many, many more, too many to name. I'm also glad to see, and I hope they're in the chamber, Charlie and Leslie Bethune, yes, well done, who have tirelessly campaigned on behalf of their daughter, Autumn. They've travelled all the way down from Scotland, and I know they and their MP, the Honourable Member for, I can't remember his constituency name, but his name is David Mundell. That'll help Hansard. I know you're not supposed to do that, but for the aid of Hansard, who can't be here today, and sends his sincere apologies and apologise for naming a member. He would welcome an undertaking from the Minister and the UK Government to engage with those affected in Scotland, recognising that this is a UK-wide issue, and like so many others, they would also welcome progress on a response too. So, every member in this room today will have a constituent that is affected by one of these health scandals. There are at least 7,000 children who've been harmed by the drug valproate since it first came onto the market in 1973, with a further estimated 28 per month exposed to it, and at least 40,000 women across the country who've been injured by mesh. It is important to note that these figures are likely to be much higher due to a lack of awareness and many parents being reluctant to label their children. Putting an exact number on these things can therefore be extremely convoluted and difficult. Regardless, these are not just statistics. Behind each number is a story of a woman who trusted a healthcare professional and was horrifyingly let down, or a woman or a child who has been damaged irreversibly, a woman who has had to alter their lives to accommodate for physical, mental and the financial toll that these scandals have taken on them. I will.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Member. Would she agree with me that it's very important that any inquiry and any report looks into the fact that the products that were used, particularly in the mesh scandal, were properly licensed for the procedures that they were being used for?
Yes, I do agree, because that is a huge part of the problem. You know, sometimes, especially with regard to medical devices, as we've spoken about, the Cumberledge report was into the medications, but also medical devices, and that's what mesh comes under. And often they can be, put into use for one thing and then they're used for something else without any further testing or investigation, and that has got to stop. I agree with the Honourable Lady. So, after all these women, families, children have been through, compensation would at least help, at the very least, pay their bills if they can't work any longer, or help ease the constant worry about how their child will be able to survive independently when they are gone. I have a constituent impacted by her mesh implant who is unable to work, as most are, and therefore cannot afford the day-to-day necessities. She is in constant pain, suffers from PTSD, has lost all trust for the medical professionals, and while compensation would not reverse her physical or mental pain, it would at least make her life easier, and there are thousands just like her, including my very own mum, who is now aged 80, and I've spoken in detail about her journey previously, in the damage to her body and health from mesh. Something she says she will regret to her dying day, which I hope is still many years off, even though mesh has ruined her long-awaited and hoped for retirement by ruining her health. So, yes, happy to.
I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this very important debate. She's making an excellent speech. My constituent, Susan Cole, who's in the public gallery, her daughter was affected by sodium valproate, and the Hughes report is now 14 months overdue since it was published. The time for payment of compensation is now. Does she agree with me that even interim compensation would be something that could be done by the government if they don't find the timeline to implement the full measures of the Hughes report?
Absolutely, I do agree with my honourable friend and commend him for all the work he's doing representing his constituents as well. And interim payments is something that happened with the contaminated blood scandal, as we know, and the how to do this is very much what the Henrietta Hughes, the Patient Safety Commissioner's report detailed. So I would ask the government to look at that in detail when they're considering their response. So if the government is not moved by the moral case of these health scandals, surely they cannot deny the economic toll that they've taken on our public and mental health services. While compensation would require finding money in what we all appreciate as a very tough fiscal situation, if we do nothing, we will still need to find money. However, one payment will be given direct to the women and children harmed. Another will be, if we don't do that, will be in the form of mental health services, the NHS and out-of-work benefits. So we have a decision to make, and for me, the thousands of women and campaigners, the answer could not be simpler. I know from conversations with campaigners and constituents that the government's recent announcement on PIP and welfare reform have caused anxiety for mesh and valproate victims who rely upon these payments to survive. And it is vital that we understand that the physical complications and illness caused by mesh and valproate are going to be with them for life, and therefore they should not be forced into work if they cannot work. For example, I spoke with the Honourable Member for Bridlington and the Walls just recently, and he told me about his constituent, Julie Robinson, and her family's experience of sodium valproate. Julie's daughter, Samantha, has been severely impacted by the epilepsy drug, which was prescribed during Julie's pregnancy. They both live in Market Weighton in the Honourable Member's constituency, and he also sends his apologies for today. He wanted me, if I could, to raise his constituent's case also, which I'm doing. And if you will allow me just to list the 7 complications that she has following what happened to her while in uterus, damaged by valproate. So she has neurodevelopment issues, including autism, memory difficulties, speech and language impairments, hearing and vision problems, heart defects requiring major surgery, cleft lip and palate leading to a year in hospital, dysmorphic facial features at birth, and fine and gross motor challenges. It's quite a list, I hope you recognise. And these conditions have significantly affected her health and education, and they will persist throughout her life. And there are thousands just like Samantha who will require lifelong care, and this will also affect her parents' ability to work. So, if you can never work again due to mesh or valproate, you deserve support and to be treated with dignity. And if you want to try and work, you should never be penalised or forced to go through reassessments and put under excessive anxiety or fear if it does not work for you and your family. Even prior to these welfare announcements, I have long argued for better education and empathy from the Department for Work and Pensions when assessing mesh and valproate victims. I hear from constituents impacted by mesh, for example, who would rather struggle financially than go through the gruelling and dehumanising process of explaining their condition and trying to claim the benefits that they're entitled to. So there needs to be a proper and effective education amongst DWP staff with regard to these health scandals, so that assessments are humiliation-free and quick for these women. So, Ms Furness, while the valproate and mesh scandals differ in the specifics of the cases, the crux of them and the flags that they raise remain the same. Both affect women, both exemplify what happens when there is a lack of honesty and communication about the risks of medical procedures, and both highlight the need for increased transparency with regard to payments made to our health professionals. They show the damage that is done when profit is put before people, when big firms avoid accountability and transparency, and when, I have to say it, medical misogyny is allowed to run rife. These are the points that I intend to emphasise and that I imagine other colleagues will touch upon also. To compare, if we consider the valproate scandal, if warnings had been given at licensing or in 1987 when Sanofi asked for information to be added to the patient information leaflet for patients, the women and children impacted by valproate would not be in this position. Likewise with mesh, if women had been properly informed of the risks of adverse effects rather than fed a false image, as my mum was, of in and out, a quick 20-minute procedure that will change your life. Well, boy, it did change your life, but not for the better. We would not have thousands of women harmed on an irreversible scale. I'll give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and also for securing this debate this afternoon. Before I became an MP, I specialised exclusively in dealing with compensation claims on behalf of women who had suffered from the use of vaginal mesh. And my honourable friend is absolutely right that the mesh was sold to these patients as a gold standard and they were misled. Does the honourable member agree that by having a proper government-backed compensation scheme will actually save the NHS money in the long run? Because as a solicitor, I was always conscious of the fact that in pursuing these claims, it was the NHS ultimately who had to pay out compensation and legal costs.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point that maybe nobody else but him would have been able to make in this debate. So I thank him for that, and I do agree. So, if the people harmed by mesh and valproate, they did nothing other than trust a medical professional's judgment. So at the very least, should do is to offer them compensation to help navigate their now damaged lives, which they have had inflicted upon them, to be honest, most horrifyingly by our very own NHS. The fact that the victims of these scandals are mainly all women is no coincidence. I spoke in this place recently about medical misogyny, and there's some colleagues here who were in that debate also. The misogyny in our own healthcare system. I said then, and I will say it again, had the thousands of women impacted by these scandals been men, I do not believe that dismissal on such a scale would have occurred. We hear stories of women seeking advice from medical professionals and being told it's all in their head. It's just their menstrual cycle, it's the menopause, or gaslit into believing it must be anything other than the devices or the medication that they were prescribed or given. Women not being listened to by medical professionals doesn't just perpetuate structural misogyny, it endangers lives. And can I just say how heartening it is to see so many male colleagues in this debate today. It really does prove that we can change things. It doesn't have to be this way. So issuing compensation to these women would at last confirm to them that they were right to be concerned and that they are not hysterical, which often, if anything you know about why something is called a hysterectomy, for instance, that women have been accused of for many hundreds of years with regard to our health. So, as well as medical misogyny, part of this defensiveness and dismissal stems from the huge sums of money that is given to the healthcare system from industry, which creates bias. But knowing this is the case isn't enough. The UK needs to adopt sunshine legislation to ensure that this information has to be fully declared in the same way that all of us in this room as MPs have to do. This should be presented via a centralised public database which is totally independent of industry. Sunlight is, as we all know, the best disinfectant, and we need to act now to prevent future scandals. I'm conscious of the time that other colleagues will have a lot to say and experiences to share, so I will end my remarks here by leaving the Minister with a few quick questions. Sorry, Minister. Will she be able to provide members and campaigners here today, and the no doubt many victims of these scandals watching at home on the internet, with a timeline of when we can expect a government response to the excellent Hughes report? And if she is unable to do this today, will she commit to writing to Baroness Merrin to ask for a time frame? Can she explain what scope there is for the government to implement a sunshine-style piece of legislation to ensure transparency of payments made from industry to our healthcare sector? In the spirit of cross-departmental working, which I know this government is committed to, will she write to the Work and Pensions Secretary for reassurance that victims of valproate and mesh scandals will not be subject to reassessment or forced into work given their physical and mental complications? And finally, in her new role, would she commit to meeting with campaigners, many of whom are here today, to hear more about the valproate and mesh scandals firsthand, if she hasn't done that already in her previous role as a backbench MP? I thank her in advance for her consideration and look forward to her answers. And Ms Furness, I will end with this. We have rightly seen compensation for the infected blood scandal, which I mentioned at the start of my remarks, the post office scandal and the Grenfell disaster. These have all been innocent people whose lives were turned upside down, whether physically or mentally or worse, through no fault of their own. I fail to see how the mesh and valproate scandals fail to meet the same criteria, and I encourage anyone opposed to compensation to consider this. Thank you.
I remind members they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered the first anniversary of the Hughes report on valproate and pelvic mesh. I just want to let you know at this stage that there are lots of you to get in, so we are already limiting the speech times to 4 minutes. To start, John Glenn.
Thank you, Ms Furness, and it's a pleasure to be called to speak in this debate. And I'd like to pay tribute to the member for Washington and Gateshead South for the work that she's done to date on this matter and for her powerful advocacy this afternoon. I've drawn to this issue from my recent experience as a minister in the last government, where I was responsible for bringing forward the infected blood compensation scheme and passing the legislation to set up the authority to pay out compensation. I do not presume to be an expert on the sodium valproate and pelvic mesh issue, nor do I seek to draw direct parallels, but I thought it would be helpful to make some observations about what I experienced in Whitehall trying to come to terms with the infected blood compensation and offer some perspectives on how we might move forward. It's been my privilege to meet with Janet Williams and Emma Murphy, two victims really of sodium valproate, who have briefed me on their long campaign going back many, many years. They have 7 children between them with disabilities consequential of valproate. And it seems to me that we've already gone through a familiar path, through the Cumberledge Review and then Henrietta Hughes' work last year. And Henrietta Hughes suggested, as the Patient Safety Commissioner, a way forward with a two-stage redress scheme and some clear next steps on what must happen, what should happen, and what the government needs to do. And we look forward to hearing a response from the Government Minister in a short while. But there are three things that I would say that I have taken from my experience. Constant delay will increase the cost and build up ill will. Lessons do need to be learned, and they just can't be platitudes recurrently uttered in a well-meaning way, put up various ministers over time who don't get to the heart of the matter. So I say that with the greatest respect. We must move on these things. We must not underestimate the complexity of delivery. There's been vast work done on trying to understand the population involved here and the range of suffering across educational experience, actually medical conditions consequential of valproate. And it's important to recognise that there are ways of putting in schemes of compensation very simply and clearly in short order. That's what happened last year with infected blood, and it can happen in this case. It is also important to improve the communications with stakeholders, so they've taken on a journey to where this is going to head to. There will be vast institutional blockers in Whitehall to stop this moving to a point of resolution swiftly. Primarily from the Treasury, and there'll be sensible conventions on processes that will delay progress unless the Minister can grip this and recognise this as a top priority. Lots of things go wrong in medicine, we all understand that, but when things go wrong when they could have been avoided, the state must step up and come to terms with it and state clearly what the way forward is. So I urge the Minister to use the power of her office for however long she has it, and I hope she has it for a long time to deliver it. It's very satisfying to be able to do so, but please, please address this matter urgently.
Lillian Jones.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Furness, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for securing this important debate. Now, the Hughes report makes grim reading, having to read about the twin scandals of sodium valproate and pelvic mesh. Both scandals have one thing in common: the lack of provision of timely, accurate information to inform patients on the benefits as well as the risks of the treatments offered to them. Many people rely on the treatment of sodium valproate to effectively manage their epilepsy, and for many it's a remarkable drug that allows them to control their condition and lead a life free from the worry of epileptic seizures. However, my constituent experienced severe side effects of this drug with no warnings and no information on the risk to pregnancy whilst taking sodium valproate. In my constituency of Kilmarnock and Loudon, a family approached me to press for action on the issue of compensation for families impacted by sodium valproate. In the case of my constituent, her daughter was born with autism as a direct result of the sodium valproate she was prescribed to control her epilepsy. She has been left with feeling guilt and self-blame for her daughter's condition, as many mothers would, given the challenges that her daughter has had to endure growing up and managing an education system where getting the right adjustments was a constant battle. And my constituent and her family have paid the consequences due to the lack of information and advice for pregnant women regarding sodium valproate. It's not fair, it shouldn't have happened, and it could have been prevented. It's depressing that we have seen an array of similar medical scandals, as well as the scandal of the Horizon system in post offices. All of these have one significant factor in common: information being withheld. A complete lack of transparency from public bodies, rather than being open to address the serious issues from the outset. The latter actions would have prevented so much distress, so much anguish, and in the case of this sodium valproate, so many children being born with lifelong medical conditions. But here we are again after the event, looking quite rightly at a public wrong, which the Hughes report published in February 2024, outlining options for redress. The previous Conservative government did what they always have: kicked cans down the road, leaving impacted women and families in limbo and making no financial provision to pay for the redress families rightly deserve. It's a scandal, and one that members opposite should be apologising to all affected families for. This Labour government is faced once again with the responsibility to pick up the mess left by the Tories in response to the Hughes report. I will continue to press the government to do the right thing. No, thank you. Which I know they want to do.
The Honourable Lady.
Sorry, I've got on so many people can speak. I know the Labour government want to do the right thing. It's in our Labour values to right wrongs and injustices such as sodium valproate and pelvic mesh. But I'm urging my honourable and right honourable friends in the government to do more and look to change the culture in government bodies that enables these scandals to happen in the first place. Transparency and accountability are what hard-working, tax-paying families demand of government. Today I'm calling for fairness for all those harmed by sodium valproate and pelvic mesh, and they receive the recognition and redress to ensure their needs are met.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Chair, first of all, a real pleasure to serve under your chairship. Can I thank the Honourable Lady for Washington and Gateshead South for leading the debate, and as she always does, in such an expert fashion. Well done. This is an issue that has impacted thousands of people and many of my constituency. It's something I've spoken on many times, and it's crucial that recognition and time is given to this. So I look forward to giving my constituents a voice in how this has impacted them, and as a DUP Westminster Hall spokesperson, I'm here to join the call for justice, because that's what the Honourable Lady has asked for, and that's what I wish to see as well. Between 2007 and 2015, a total of 5,255 women in Northern Ireland underwent vaginal tape procedures for stress, urinary incontinence. In June 2017, it was then reported in the media the challenges and the difficulties faced by women in Northern Ireland due to this, leading to a pause in the use of mesh in Northern Ireland. In addition to this mesh being used on women, men have also been affected by similar issues. I think it's important to add this into the debate, particularly for hernia repairs. Research has shown that some 10 to 15% of men experience chronic pain post-surgery. I was contacted by a male constituent in 2020 and he told me his experience. Upon being subject to excruciating pain, his GP denied to him that this was due to the mesh, and he faced many infections, numerous antibiotics and extremely limited day-to-day life. He informed me that for so many years his problems were getting worse, and he contemplated taking his own life on the grounds, not that he wanted to die, but he does not want to struggle with the pain that he has. So the sad reality of this, Madam Chair, is that the case for so many people, not across Northern Ireland, but across this whole nation. Both men and women have been directly affected by something that was supposed to do good, but it quite clearly didn't do that. So they deserve some form of redress, and more importantly, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing by the NHS and by the government departments. Similarly, in the Hughes report, Madam Chair, highlights the need for redress for women who were prescribed sodium valproate during pregnancy, not to mention the fact that it's been long known to pose risk to unborn children. This is most certainly a conversation that must be had around compensation, and furthermore, better regulation around the use of drugs in general that are known to have impacts on women, especially during pregnancy. It is said that some 20,000 children were exposed to the drug in the womb, leading to many living with neurodevelopmental disorders today, such as autism. I've spoken to many parents, many of my constituents, who have said that the ultimate feeling from this is guilt. It's something seriously wrong that a mother feels guilty for taking something she was told there wouldn't be any harm in. The guilt of not asking enough questions, and the guilt of taking the medication where the due diligence should have been done, more research and double checking should have been done to make sure that these were suitable for pregnant women. Many find it difficult to cope, Madam Chair, both mentally and physically, from the long-lasting pain, the trauma, the anxiety, the guilt that racks them for what they've done. On the first anniversary of this report, I look to the Minister on behalf of my constituents for a commitment to putting things right. These matters do not disappear, neither do the thousands of people suffering to this very day. From primadose to thalidomide, to pelvic mesh to sodium valproate, we must do better by all of our people so that they know that they're not forgotten. So I wait very much the Minister's response and would be grateful if the Minister could provide an update on any compensation scheme in relation to this matter, and that the Minister will do all that she can to ensure that due compensation is awarded. My constituents want that. Those who suffer as a result of it want that, and today I want to have that on their behalf. Thanks so much.
Mark Seawoods.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mrs Furness. Can I start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Gateshead South, for securing such an important debate and for all of her tireless work on this issue. I'm a fairly latecomer to this issue, and I became acutely aware of the issues around mesh implants when a constituent in Leeds South West and Morley, who had suffered because of this procedure, came to see me at my surgery. I'd like to highlight her experiences today with her consent. She's asked me to do so. Her story starts 17 years ago after having mesh implants offered by the NHS. Little did she know that years later she would face severe health problems, despite being assured that these implants were of the gold standard. The mesh would hang out of her body. It would be trimmed to try and prevent this. She eventually had it removed, but this came far too late. Some of the mesh had disintegrated and could no longer be removed. This caused hernias, this caused incontinence, and more recently she believes it had a role to play in her cancer diagnosis. She has tumours in and around where the implants were inserted. She tells me that these implants have completely ruined her life. She's had to give up her business and now has to deal with the health impacts every day while having ongoing treatment for cancer. The one bright spot from our meeting is that it was so clear to me that she and her husband were a team and that he had been there throughout everything and will continue to be there throughout everything she's having to go through. I was moved by that. Now, my constituent, quite understandably, is seeking redress. And that led to another issue that she's had to contend with, that people in the audience will have had to contend with, and that's that the NHS complaints policy states that for clinical negligence, the time limit for any claim is 3 years from the date of injury. Now, while there are some exceptions regarding the knowledge of the industry, this has been absolutely no comfort to my constituent, who's yet to receive any acknowledgement that she could be entitled to redress. Now, this, of course, was partially addressed in the Hughes report that's already been referenced today, and it presented options for compensation for those harmed by pelvic mesh implants. It is of disappointment to those impacted that there's still been no response to this report over a year on. And while there have been some good steps in treatment and support, we must now at least address the calls for financial compensation. Therefore, I'd encourage the Minister to give any outline they can as to when the families, when the victims will be updated on this. With time so short, that is the one point I would ask the Minister to respond to. In the words of the Patient Safety Commissioner, Dr. Hughes, patients and families are suffering right now. And whilst the government reviews my recommendations, it does not put their problems on hold. I know the Minister will be aware of this, and I remain grateful for the government's positive work so far. However, I urge the government to do all they can, not just to reassure those who've been impacted by this, but to respond to the Hughes report at the earliest possible opportunity.
Would my honourable
Thank you.
friend allow... You just finished. I was going to invite my honourable friend to allow me to intervene a bit.
Can you sit down, please? Yeah. I've got Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Ms. Furness. And I must say the honourable member for Leeds South West and Morley has done us all a service by outlining in detail just one case out of what are understood to be a minimum of 10,000, and some estimates put the number of people damaged by mesh as high as 40,000. And when we look at that statistic, we should bear it in mind when we think about the limited redress that people have had so far through the courts. In the time available, I wish to touch very briefly on the topics of research, legal cases, waiting lists and financial support. On the question of research, I make no apology for coming back to this because, as we have heard, the victims of the mesh implant scandal are still suffering today, and there is no definitive gold standard of how to remediate their suffering. I did put down a question in February that drew attention to a particular world-leading expert called Dr. Dionysios Veronikis, who has developed extremely effective, so I gather, mesh removal methods in Missouri. And I believe that he has offered in the past to try and give the benefits of his research and his successful practice to members of the NHS, and I would hope that the Minister would take this away and consider whether or not an effort should be made to reach out to the best practitioners worldwide on mesh removal and to take advantage of their expertise. I'll give it.
On this question of treatment, I mean, one of my constituents, who I will call Louise, endured years of pain and suffering due to the complications from mesh implants. And after facing delays caused by her local hospital, she had no choice but to pay for a private operation that would remediate the issue in one operation, but that would not be available on the NHS. She would have had to have gone through 3 separate, painful and lengthy procedures. So would my honourable friend agree with me that her experience underscores the urgent need for investment in urogynecology services, as well as the justice which everybody is rightly calling for?
Well, this is exactly right, because the problem is that people are going back for partial remediation time and time again, and it is not achieving desired outcome. And when we move on to the question of how someone can get financial redress other than by virtue of a government scheme, we find that in terms of those who have instituted legal actions, between 2014 and 2024, there were 1,252 legal cases initiated, with 356 only of those being settled either in or out of court with damages, but 678 cases concluded without any such damages being awarded. And I understand that many of those rejected were rejected because they were out of time. And this leads me back to a point that was highlighted during the last debate we had in December last year, when it was pointed out that the 10-year limit on initiating action arising out of medical devices needs to be extended, because in this particular case it can often have been long after that limit has been passed before it can be established that the victim has been damaged by mesh in the first place. And I did say, remember that minimum figure of at least 10,000 mesh damaged women, and bear in mind that out of that figure, which is pretty large, and the real figure is probably much larger still, only 1,200 legal actions were initiated. And that's hardly surprising because of the extra burden placed upon someone initiating a legal action. So, thirdly, I would like to look at the question of removal centres. There are 9 of these specialist centres, and we have established that people who are extremely and justifiably worried about going back to one of them, that might be run by the very person who inserted the mesh, do have the option of visiting other centres. But when it comes to waiting times, we actually find that there's a huge variation. The waiting time for Bristol, which has a high reputation particularly, is much longer than for some of the other centres. And finally, on the question of financial support, we know that the government has had to take moves to deal with the question of PIP. We hope it will not affect these victims adversely.
After the next speaker, we will be limiting time to 3 minutes. That means that your microphone will be cut off at that time, so I'd appreciate it if you did really look at the clock when you're speaking. Can I have Warren Josh?
Thank you, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I want to thank my honourable friend from Washington and Gateshead South for securing this important debate and for all the work that she does on this issue. As I've mentioned earlier, I specialised in pursuing clinical negligence claims on behalf of women who had had mesh implants, and I have seen many examples of the type described by my honourable friend earlier about the life-changing injuries that these women have had. So, as confirmed by the Hughes report, these women were in debilitating pain after the implant. They were forced to stop working, faced a lifetime of uncertainty, had a major impact on their relationships. My honourable friend's client was lucky in the sense that she had a supporting husband, but in many cases I have had clients where the marital relationship has broken down because of the inability to have intimate relationships following the mesh implant. The honourable member opposite has mentioned 10,000 women being affected from pelvic mesh implants. The campaign organisation Sling the Mesh has argued that that figure could be as high as 40,000. Before we had the Hughes report published in February last year, we had the Cumberledge report prepared by Baroness Cumberledge in July 2020, who did mention that there should be an apology from the government. A scheme should be set up to meet the cost of providing additional care and support to those affected, and also to have a network of specialist centres. A patient engagement survey carried out by the Patient Safety Commissioner found that over half of those impacted by pelvic mesh or by valproate had said that they had a very negative impact on their ability to work, and it affected their financial situation, with over three-quarters saying that it had a very negative impact on their mental health. It is essential, I would suggest, that the government does provide a redress scheme. The member opposite has said that delay is not going to help matters, and we've all heard the phrase justice delayed is justice denied. The clients that I dealt with just wanted to move on with their lives, and I think that is really essential, that we have a redress system that works quickly so that these women can try and rebuild their lives and move on. The redress scheme must also deal with not only financial compensation but also non-financial compensation. And honourable member mentioned opposite PIP. A lot of these women struggled to apply for PIP and other benefits after they'd been injured. They had little or no access to mental health services, and they were exposed to an inaccessible adversarial legal system which was complicated to navigate. In legal claims, there is often lots of delay. We need to move away from that. So I would suggest that we have a government-backed compensation scheme similar to the infected blood compensation scheme that this government is properly pursuing. Only with such a scheme will we have proper redress for these women and fully ensure that justice is given to those impacted by these tragedies.
Blackman.
Sodium valproate is currently the third most prescribed epilepsy treatment for many women. And of course, it's very effective in combating epilepsy. What they don't tell you is, of course, the damage that can be caused if you're pregnant at the time. And indeed, the damaging effects that have taken place have affected thousands of women over the years. The alarm bells were going off in 1973 about the damage this could do to the unborn child. And indeed, there was a legal claim between 2004 and 2010 which sought to get compensation for those affected. Sadly, this was dropped when legal aid was denied. When I was elected in 2010, I took up the cudgels, as it were, on behalf of these poor women suffering from this problem. One of my constituents, Karen Buck, who's in the audience today, is a mother of 4 children, all of whom have been affected as a result of her taking sodium valproate during pregnancy. Her daughter, Bridget, was born with severe brain damage, spina bifida, and a condition which is directly linked to this drug and has affected others. Sadly, Bridget's case is one of many others across the country. Karen has dedicated her life to serving Bridget and looking after her, but she should never have been prescribed the drug in the first place. And in November the 13th, Karen and the other campaigners put over 1,000 signatures to a petition at Downing Street. I would ask the Minister to follow up on that petition, because so far the petitioners have not received an answer, and they deserve an answer at least. They have been asking for compensation. They've been asking for removal of this drug from the market. They've been campaigning for years for a redress scheme, and I'm proud to support them. It's not just about financial restitution, it's all about accountability, and the drug companies, in particular Sanofi, who push this drug. I understand they're withdrawing the high-strength drug in September of this year, but the rest of the drugs will still continue to be available. It's all about ensuring they get the support and assistance they need. Now, following the Cumberledge review, the previous government listened to the recommendations, appointed Dr Hughes as the Patient Safety Commissioner in 2022, asked her to produce a report. She refused that report, and then before the election of July last year, ministers wrote to the Commissioner asking her to what needed to be done and highlighting the need for primary legislation to provide compensation for those suffering. That is what we need, Minister, and we need that primary legislation to come through so that the victims can actually get the compensation they're due. So clearly, all this campaigning has had an effect, but we need the government to step up. But the progress has stalled since this time. So I remain committed to helping and assisting those victims to ensure they get the justice and support they deserve.
James Frith.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Furness. Let me congratulate my honourable friend, the member of Washington and Gateshead South, for securing this important debate. I will be focusing my remarks today principally on MESH and the experience of my constituent Bev, but let me first say just how disappointing it is that the seemingly resolved issue in an earlier parliament in which I served on the matter of sodium valproate and its risks to women of childbearing age and their child, that it has been anything but resolved. Sometimes our parliament, our politics is too much process and not enough progress, too much rhetoric, not enough record. So I hope that the full reconciliation of those issues for these women and children victims of this historic injustice, something that I've spoken on and worked on at length between 2017 and 19, I send my solidarity to the gallery. I want to speak to the experiences and the victims of the survivors of all of these appalling scandals, but particularly to Bev, my constituent. What they have shown as courageous campaigners, bringing an issue to the forefront, turning personal trauma into activism, women never told of the risks, trusted in the advice of medical professionals who now live with life-changing consequences. Bev, my constituent, endured years of crippling pain before the mesh that had caused it was eventually dissected, in her words, out of her body. Bev walked into my office to see me, sunken by the immobility of this pernicious scandal and the effects it's caused her. She is physically weighed down by the legacy and trauma that the pain has caused her. Yet she remains infectious, good company, and someone I'm proud to stand and speak for. The thing is, her surgery should never have needed this, needed a device that should never have harmed her. The loss of mobility, continence, permanent nerve damage that Bev suffered is compounded then by the years of the missed time with her family, giving up her career and a vocation as a midwife, and navigating life with emotional, psychological trauma that she should never have endured. Bev is not alone. Bev, you are not alone. And it's a testament to this place and the gallery as to how many people are in our thoughts today as victims of this that demand redress from this new government. Thank you.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I join in thanking the honourable member for securing what is a very important debate. And like other honourable members who've spoken, I too have constituents who suffered from this scandal, and Colleen and her husband Andy are in the public gallery today, and they first contacted me in February last year about their son Byron. Colleen has epilepsy and, like so many others, was prescribed with valproate. And throughout the IVF and her pregnancy, they were not warned about the potentially harmful side effects that remaining on the medication could have, despite repeatedly being asked what medication they were on. And we know that use in pregnancy leads to neurodevelopment disorders in 30 to 40% of cases. And Colleen and Andy have told me about their son Byron and what a lovely person he is, and particularly his love for Star Wars. But he has autism, learning disabilities, speech and language development issues. But he is happy at the school that he is at. Sadly, we know this is not an isolated incident, and around 20,000 children have been harmed. So parents like Colleen and Andy deserve to see redress. But they've had to fight to get the support that they have for him, going to a tribunal to get assistance with his education. And they're still battling to get an updated diagnosis to ensure that he gets support as he moves into adulthood in the coming years. And following the Cambridge review, we had the report by Dr. Hughes, commissioned by my former colleague Maria Caulfield. And a year ago, that published the options for financial redress for an interim and a main scheme. And the interim scheme was meant to be up and running with compensation payments being made this year, with the main scheme to follow with more bespoke support based on assessment of individual circumstances. And we need to get on with this, and my honourable friend from Salisbury talked about the experience of other inquiries and other redress schemes, and we need to take that so we can get this scheme up and running. I regret the previous government didn't solve this issue before the election. But what happens now is what is important, and that's a priority. And when I asked Colleen and Andy what they wanted to hear from the Minister, they said they want a commitment to get the scheme up and running and a time frame for the government to deliver the interim and then the final compensation, as well as an apology from all of those who are responsible for this scandal. It's 7 years since the Cambridge review began, but much longer that people have been fighting for justice. And for Colleen and Andy's sake, and thousands of parents like them, they need progress. They need redress so they can be confident about their children's future. I know the Minister is relatively new in post, but I hope that she'll be able to give those families some of that assurance today.
Neil Francis.
Thank you, Ms Burness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And again, I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Washington Gateshead, for seeking this important debate. I pay tribute to my constituents, Paul and Gillian, who themselves have experienced the impact of pelvic mesh, and I raised Paul's experience in the debate, again in my honourable friend's name, back on the 5th of December. For Paula, not much has changed, and she's still living with the devastation that pelvic mesh has on her life and her well-being. And Paul and Gillian, as we've heard, are not alone in experiencing this. According to the Patient Safety Commissioner, the lower-end estimate suggests 10,000 women have been impacted by these harms. I'd also like to pay tribute to all those that have campaigned for many years on the issue of sodium valproate. My good friend and former constituency MP, Teresa Pearson, here from Thamesmead, worked very closely, I know, with many of those families over many years, and she knows it's an issue very close to my heart. The Epilepsy Research Institute welcomed the Hughes report's recognition of the vital role research plays in understanding and mitigating the risks of anti-seizure medication, and they continue to raise their key asks in how we can move forward from the recommendations of the report. Their view is that there's a need for ministers to provide a clear timeline for implementing the redress schemes and research funding recommended in the Hughes report, and that there's a need for dedicated ring-fence funding for epilepsy research, particularly into the effects of anti-seizure medications during pregnancy. And I speak as someone, I'm the husband and the father of people who are both on sodium valproate, both my wife and daughter. And certainly, I know sodium valproate didn't affect my daughter, even though she has cerebral palsy from a brain injury at birth. But that seeing what happened to my wife, having been on sodium valproate, and that whole issue of taking off sodium valproate, and someone whose life was turned upside down, 12 years seizure-free, to having to surrender her driving licence, not being able to work for periods, and what that does to women in that situation, even though she had that correct advice and eventually had to return to sodium valproate because of the amount of seizures she was having and the impact it had on her life. I don't for a moment know what the families here today have gone through, but I do know that continually for women who are prescribed sodium valproate, the impact that can have on your life and what happens to you. So also the Epilepsy Research Institute asked that we ensure that regulatory bodies act swiftly on safety concerns and that pregnant women with epilepsy have access to the best possible information and care, and that they ask that we need to continue to engage with experts and patient groups to ensure that policies reflect the needs of those affected. So when we get to the Minister's closing remarks, obviously I'd also like her to look at those recommendations. But as I say, consistently, there are people that have been impacted by mesh and sodium valproate, and we need to look at those and that wider impact, because sodium valproate continues to be prescribed, and we need to have that continuing review of how that affects women through their lives.
Yeah. David Williams.
It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Furness, and I warmly thank my honourable friend for bringing forward this important debate today. With respect to pelvic mesh, it is a national scandal that this material has been used in thousands of operations, often without a thorough explanation of the side effects. And it's also a national scandal that this matter is not at the forefront of public awareness and attention. As we've heard, at the very least, 10,000 women were injured by pelvic mesh implants, and it could be many more, as we've heard, and their lives have been permanently altered. They now live with chronic pain, they find it difficult to work, they find it difficult to live their lives well, and they suffer from a number of serious health conditions. These women have been badly let down, and how can it be acceptable that so many women now live with debilitating pain? I think this scandal also speaks to a wider issue, the continuous neglect of women's health. It's unacceptable that we still hear so many accounts of women's feelings like their health concerns are not being adequately addressed. I'd like to place on record my thanks to all those in the room who have campaigned tirelessly around restoring justice to women, and a special thank you to the Honourable Member for Washington and Gateshead South, who has raised this issue for such a long time and on so many occasions. Like many members here today, we must push for redress for the victims of this scandal. And sadly, like so many other honourable members here, I must raise the case of one of my constituents who told me she felt let down by failed medical advice when receiving a procedure. She told me she was not told about the nature of the operation, she was not given consent forms, she was later told she did not need the procedure to have been taking place at all. So to close, when I met with my constituent, she told me about the level of pain she was in. And I quote, she said it was horrendous, and that passing stool or water felt like passing glass. Cases like this should never have happened to my constituent, nor the thousands of women up and down this country. Those harmed deserve better, those harmed deserve proper redress, and they deserve that redress now. Thank you.
Thank you. Jess Brown-Fuller, winding up for the Lib Dems.
Thank you, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. So I'd like to begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Washington and Gateshead South for securing today's timely and important debate on the first anniversary of the Hughes report. She has been a tireless champion for those harmed by pelvic mesh and children born with birth defects as a result of sodium valproate, and I commend her work as chair of the First Do No Harm Mesh Primados Valproate All-Party Parliamentary Group. That's a mouthful. Thank you for that, Honourable Member. Couldn't have been a bit shorter, of which I am also a member of. In 2024, the Patient Safety Commissioner estimated that at least 10,000 women in England have been harmed by vaginal mesh implants, some involving the mesh slicing into the bladder, bowels or vaginal wall of these women, leaving them in permanent pain, sometimes unable to walk, work, have sex, leaving their lives changed profoundly. And as multiple honourable members, including the member for New Forest East, mentioned, the campaign group Sling the Mesh believes that actually the true number could be closer to 40,000 women. So when Dr. Henrietta Hughes agreed to take forward this report, she made one thing very clear. This was not to be another review that just gathers dust. This report must lead to action, not just words. And we are now a year on and the people affected are still waiting. The Hughes report makes the case plainly. There is a clear need for redress. These women were, in most cases, not failed by a single doctor or a one-off error. They were failed by the system, by healthcare structures, by regulators, and by governments who did not listen when they should have. The redress we need is not about blame, it's about restorative justice, co-designed with the patients and distinct from adversarial court proceedings, where, as other honourable members have mentioned, women are having to relive their experience and their trauma time and time again. So the Hughes report recommended establishment of an independent redress agency, and the lack of clarity on creating a bespoke redress scheme has left those patients in limbo, and that limbo is deepening the harm. As the Honourable Member for Salisbury shared some useful insight with the room from his learnings from the infected blood scandal. In my own constituency of Chichester, several women have shared their stories with me. These are stories of being dismissed by clinicians, of medical records being incomplete or inaccessible or not reflecting the true circumstance that these women are under, of suffering through chronic pain and ill health even after the mesh has been removed. I've met two of these women in person, one of which I met in her own home, because she is so profoundly injured and traumatised she no longer leaves her property for any reason. With no access to social media or the outside world, my constituent had no idea that she wasn't alone. She had no idea there was a national campaign for justice and felt totally alone, embarrassed and broken by the circumstance. So I promised to stand by her and with the thousands of others up and down the country who have been failed. I will just take the opportunity to mention Paula Goss, who is a national campaigner and constituent of my honourable friend, the member for Thornbury and Yate. Paula was affected by mesh procedure, which was not covered by the original Cumberledge Review. The surgeon involved in her mesh procedure was found guilty of serious misconduct, but only suspended for 6 months. Of the 462 patients harmed at the Spire Private Hospital and the Southmead Hospital, just 5 were called as witnesses to the General Medical Council. And when Paula tried to complain, she was told she was out of time, as many members across the House have reflected today, and that it wasn't in the public interest to waiver the deadline. How can we call this justice? That's not justice, and it's not accountability. And cases like Paula's and those raised by my constituents in Chichester are why we as Liberal Democrats believe that the entire set of recommendations in the Cumberledge report must be implemented without further delay. And this scandal isn't limited to mesh and sodium valproate. The same approach must be extended to other medical device scandals like Primados. We cannot continue to treat each crisis as an isolated issue. We need a system-wide approach to patient safety and accountability, and that means a duty of candour on public officials. So the Liberal Democrats would achieve this by establishing an office of the whistleblower so that safety concerns can be raised without fear or delay. And that means embedding patient voices into the heart of our healthcare system, not as an afterthought, but as a fundamental principle. Earlier this year, 100 women secured a financial settlement from mesh manufacturers. This is a drop in the ocean when it comes to the number of women that deserve redress. Every single woman affected by this scandal deserves proper compensation, not just those that are able to bring forward lengthy and difficult legal claims.
The Honourable Member, please give way.
Happily give way to the Honourable Member.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. The Hughes report actually recommends that those women affected by pelvic mesh should receive an initial interim payment of £25,000, followed by a main payment afterwards. Does the Honourable Member agree that with all the women that the Honourable Member has mentioned, that interim payment will be of some comfort to these women so that they could at least begin to try and get some redress and to make some improvements with their lives?
And the Honourable Member lays out from a real place of experience and knowledge. So who am I to come against anything that he says as the expert in the room? I totally agree that that would provide some reassurance that their cases have been heard, recognised by this government. And finally, Ms Furness, we are still waiting for a formal response from this government to the Hughes report. So it was promised in due course back in August. Due course has come and gone. These women have waited long enough. People who have already suffered for years should not be forced to wait any longer for the compensation and recognition that they deserve. So let's end this culture of delay, disbelief and denial, and let's do what we should have done years ago. Listen, apologise and then act. Thank you.
Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a pleasure to serve under your stewardship today, and touching as myself as a GP who has seen patients with valproate injuries and mesh injuries, to suddenly be stood at the dispatch box as a chance to be able to raise this up is humbling in my side personally for me. But I'm extremely grateful to the Honourable Member for Washington and Gateshead South for proposing this debate. It's yet another important topic that she's brought to this House, and she's actually in danger of rivalling the member for Strangford for bringing so many Westminster Hall debates on health, and a true testament to the dynamics we have here of two worthy champions fighting it out for the person in the country doing the most for health, and congratulations to her on that. And I also remember her powerful contributions to last month's Westminster Hall debate on women's health last month. And again today, she's done the same. With her personal experience of her mother's situation, and as the chair of the APPG for First Do No Harm, she really is a true champion. Now that we're past the first anniversary of the Hughes report, this debate is an important opportunity for those women and families affected by valproate and pelvic mesh to get clarity from the government on what progress is being made on the recommendations of the report and a way forward broadly. And it's heartening to see here today, unanimously, how the Chamber has come together to ask for that progress. I welcome that the previous government took productive steps and asked the Patient Safety Commissioner, Dr. Henrietta Hughes, to undertake work in this area. And Dr. Hughes' report was issued a year ago now, and it's clear that the victims are anxious for some form of redress for the harms that have been caused. The report states, and I quote, "The first point to make clear is that the Commissioner thinks there is a clear case for redress based on the systemic health and regulatory failures revealed by First Do No Harm review in 2020. The Commissioner supports a restorative practice-based redress scheme, co-design and with affected patients, and which is therefore, by very definition, different from proceedings which court proceedings which seek to attribute blame. Of course, the punctuation of an election halts progress, and now, with new ministers and a new government 9 months in, it's right to continue keeping the spotlight on this topic. So to that end, my questions today echo many of those raised in the room here. Could the Minister clarify the government's position on her recommendation for financial redress and when they will respond to the report? Could she give a time frame? And has the government or the ministers met with Dr. Hughes and campaigners to discuss the report? And will she commit to communicating with all those affected, as we've heard, as it's so important to help reduce some of the anxiety? It's already been a long and painful journey for victims, so continuing to take steps forward to address the fallout is really important. Further to the Hughes report, I'm also glad the last government took several actions beginning addressing the injustices suffered by victims of valproate and pelvic mesh. My honourable friend for Godalming and Ash, the former Health Secretary, established the Cumberledge Review, and significant progress was rightly made before the election on implementing 7 of Dr. Hughes' recommendations, including an unreserved apology to the women affected, children and their families on behalf of the healthcare system, for the time the system took to listen and respond. And I'm pleased to see that the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton, the new Minister at the time, reiterated that apology when these issues were last debated in December 2024. The appointment of Dr. Hughes as the first Patient Safety Commissioner to advocate for patients and improve the safety of medicines and medical devices, and a network of specialist centres established to provide comprehensive treatment, care and advice for those affected by implanted mesh. Now, honourable members have already referenced the Westminster Hall debate on these issues last December, and looking at that debate, I was pleased to hear from the honourable member for Gorton and Denton that the government was committed to implementing the remaining 3 recommendations and that this was a priority for the government. He said, "It's a priority for this government. We are working at pace and we remain focused on making meaningful progress. This is a complex area of work involving several departments, but we are committed to providing an update at the earliest opportunity. I have heard the desire for urgency today, and I hope that we can make progress that members want to see." Now, I know that there's been a change in personnel in the ministerial team since that debate, but can the Minister confirm this remains a priority for the government regardless? And given it's 4 months since the last debate, and the Minister recognises the desire for urgency, what new update can the Minister provide on that progress that has been made in implementing these recommendations since December? Now, as stated, I was in the debate on the women's health last month, in which the Honourable Member for Washington and Gateshead South raised the issue, and the Minister's response was, I quote, On sodium valproate and pelvic mesh, the Cumberledge Review made 9 recommendations, of which the government accepts 7. I can confirm that the national pause remains in place. I also note that the Minister frequently quotes the following lines in her response to written parliamentary questions from colleagues. The government will be providing an update to the Patient Safety Commissioner's report at the earliest opportunity. So could she say today, is this the earliest opportunity today? If not, would she be kind enough to give an estimate of when this might be? During that December debate, my shadow ministerial colleague, the Honourable Member for Sleaford and North Hykeham, also raised concerns about the experiences of some of the women within the specialist mesh centres and urged ministers to look into this. I'd be grateful if the Minister could set out, does she share those same concerns? If so, what steps have her department take to address these and look into them? And finally, regarding sodium valproate, we've heard from the member for Harrow East and the member for Bexley Heath the difficulty we have when it comes to valproate about the damage it can cause, but how important it is as an epilepsy drug to support those keep seizure free. The report itself states, however, the Commissioner continues to have concerns about incomplete adherence to the pregnancy prevention programme requirements. As a result, in November 2023, she recommended that NHS England created a fully funded and resourced system for improving the safe use of the most potent tractogenic medications, beginning with the safe use of valproate. So that being said, could the Minister update this House on the work stream regarding tractogenic medications, and more importantly, given the news of the abolition of NHS England, what safeguards are being put in place to ensure this system is resourced adequately? Chair, 1 year on is a milestone, one to be celebrated for getting this far after such a torrid journey in raising concerns, having them heard and getting them responded to. But it is just that, a milestone in a journey, not a destination. And for those so affected and their families, they will be keen to know what redress they are due, the mechanisms to deliver it, so their cases might finally be fully rectified. After all, we cannot undo the past, but we can make amends for it, and I hope the government will continue to act on the recommendations to do so.
Minister.
Thank you, Ms Furness. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Gateshead South, on securing this important debate, and thank all honourable members for their powerful words on this emotive topic. I know my honourable friend met with the Minister for Patient Safety, Baroness Merrin, last November to discuss the transparency of industry payments to healthcare practitioners, one of the 9 recommendations that the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review put to the then government in 2018. This is something the government takes extremely seriously. We must ensure lessons are learned, and that's why we're putting patient safety at the heart of improving our health and social care system. And I will continue to build a system that listens, hears and acts with speed, compassion and proportionality. I want to repeat the apology that the previous government made, echoed by my predecessor and Baroness Merrin. And I say to all of those mentioned today, to Samantha and her family, to the member for Washington and Gateshead South, ma'am, to the constituents of the members for Leeds, South West and Morley, Stoke-on-Trent, Folkestone and Hythe, Chichester, to Karen from Harrow East, to Bev from Bury North, to Colleen, Andy and Byron from North West Norfolk, to Paula and Gillian from Bexley Heath and Crayford, to Paula Goss, to all those affected in the gallery and all those affected across the country, we are sorry. We are sorry for the time the system took to listen to you and to your families. Everyone who has suffered complications from sodium valproate and pelvic mesh implants have our deepest sympathies, and our assurance that we have and will continue to listen to those affected. I'm grateful to the Patient Safety Commissioner, Dr Henrietta Hughes, and her team for the Hughes report, published just over a year ago, which built upon the important work started by Baroness Cumberledge in 2020. We will continue to work closely with Dr Hughes on how best to support affected patients and prevent future harm, both on this issue and a number of others. Madam Chair, the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review was among the first of its kind, shining a searing spotlight on the harmful side effects of certain medicines and medical devices, including sodium valproate and pelvic mesh. The Cumberland Review revealed grave systemic issues in our health system which needed to be addressed with urgency. And these covered areas range from the healthcare system's lack of engagement with patients to the lack of safety monitoring for devices once they are on the market. That's why we're working to improve how the system listens and responds to concerns raised by patients, to strengthen the evidence base on which decisions are made and improve the safety of medicines and medical devices. Recommendation 8B of the IMMDS review stated that there should be mandatory reporting for industry payments made to the health sector, akin to the US Sunshine Act. The previous government accepted this in principle and held a 6-week consultation. I recognise the importance of transparency and trust in the health system, and the department is now considering options regarding payment reporting with an aim to publish a response later this year. I absolutely understand why colleagues are pushing for clarity over our response to the Hughes report. I'm acutely aware that this is a difficult and sensitive topic, and I appreciate frustrations around timescales. But this should not be rushed, and the government will need to carefully consider all of the options and the associated costs before responding to the report's recommendations. I want to assure members that we will continue to progress this work across government, ensuring that lessons are learned. And I will commit to writing to the Baroness Maron on these timescales as requested by so many members today.
I think it's true to say that the author of the Hughes report anticipated that the government would want to take its time over these matters, but this is why she and Baroness Cumberledge, I believe as well, recommended an interim payment. And if that interim payment could at least be made, then people might be more patient about the bells and whistles that have to be added to the response later on.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I do appreciate the frustrations. Since coming into government last July, patient safety has, and I can confirm that it remains, a top priority for this government. But though I understand it has been a year since publication, it is a complex issue and it involves several government departments, and it is important that we get it right. As I've said, I will commit to writing to the Baroness Maron on the issue of timescales as requested to get some clarification on that further. And we will be, I will just finish this point, and we are committed to learning from other instances where patient safety has been impacted, such as the infected blood inquiry, as mentioned by the Honourable Member for Salisbury. Does he still wish to?
Yes, I'm extremely grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I wasn't earlier trying to suggest that her tenure in office would be short-lived. I wish her every success in what her endeavours, and I think the spirit of today has been about cross-party consensus, not seeking to make political points about this matter. But what I would say to her is that she can go back to her officials and say, look, there are 2 very recent precedents for interim payments on the infected blood compensation scheme of quite significant numbers. They were maximised so that there would be no loss to the public purse, i.e. they were entitlements that everyone would have been able to receive. And that mechanism is there. It can happen sooner. And I recognise the words that she's speaking, and I wish her well in her endeavours, but she should be able to do something with that information.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I can assure him that we are working at pace on this. It is a complicated matter. We are taking note of previous similar situations, and I can assure him and the rest of the House that we will be updating the Patient Safety Commissioner at the earliest opportunity. I do appreciate it's frustrating that I can't give an exact date and timescale today, but we are working to make sure that we get this right.
Right, and she's absolutely right to be saying that patient safety must be at the forefront. However, we know that 40% of women who are pregnant have development difficulties for their babies, and 1 in 9 have severe handicaps following birth. Yet these drugs are still being prescribed to pregnant women. So will she have a look at what can be done to make sure that these women who are pregnant, who have suffered from epilepsy, can at least be advised about the position and then decide whether they want to take the risk or not?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. And on sodium valproate, I am very encouraged that the number of women still being prescribed valproate has reduced significantly following MHRA's introduction of the Pregnancy Prevention Plan. So in April 2018, just over 27,441 women aged under 55 were prescribed valproate in England, but in March 2024 that number has come down to just under 16,000. It's a reduction of 42%. You know, nobody should stop taking valproate without advice from their healthcare professional. But beyond lowering prescription rates, I'm also grateful to see Dr. Rebecca Bromley, who is here, heading up the Fetal Exposure to Medicine Services pilot study. This study is running for 18 months, commissioned by NHS England, and it's a multidisciplinary clinical service providing expert assessment, diagnosis and advice for individuals harmed following exposure to sodium valproate. So we do recognise those concerns. And on top of that, you know, what I fundamentally believe and know is that patients know what support they need. And this government is determined to make patients feel truly heard, to make sure patients are truly heard and give them more choice and control over their own health care. The Patient Safety Commissioner rightfully sought views from those affected about issues they are facing with service provision and what support they feel would be most valuable. Hearing from patients is at the heart of our consideration of the Hughes report, which is why Baroness Merrin held a roundtable in December with groups representing patients impacted by sodium valproate and pelvic mesh. And I know she remains extremely grateful to all attendees for sharing their stories and those of the patients that they represent. Madam Chair, I am aware of the time and there are many issues that I have been unable to cover in the short time available. However, I will commit to writing to all honourable members that have raised specific concerns with a response. Because, Madam Chair, words can't express how sorry we are to the women who've suffered from severe and life-changing complications from both sodium valproate and pelvic mesh. We are actively considering this issue, and I wish there was more I could say at this time. I've heard the calls for swiftness, for clarity, for boldness on the Commissioner's recommendations, and I shall bring this forward at the earliest opportunity. I'm sure that this is not the last time this important topic will be discussed, and I know colleagues will continue to hold our feet to the fire until this gets done. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Hodgson to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Furness. Can I thank everyone sincerely who has made the time to come along and speak today on this most vital issue. You have all made such valuable contributions in this debate, and it's really heartening for me to hear such a great degree of consensus across the House that there is a wrong to be righted and that this new Labour government has the opportunity to do just that. There are so many honourable members who would have liked to have been here today. Indeed, while I was on my feet, my honourable friend, the member for Harlow, messaged to send his apologies, so I said I would make sure that was on the record. But can I thank again the Minister and the Shadow Minister and the lady who speaks for the Lib Dems for listening today and for their really intelligent and fulsome contributions. There is so much expertise on this issue across the House. If we can't get this right and get this sorted, then nobody can, I would say. But I'm particularly pleased that the Minister apologised on behalf of the Government again in such a fulsome and moving manner. She actually moved me to tears. I don't know about anybody else, but I am a bit soft in that regard. But also I hope she will agree to perhaps meet with campaigners. I know Baroness Merrin has in the other place, but you know, to continue this conversation. I'm sure that they and who are watching today and everyone watching at home will have appreciated the empathy and the understanding that she has shown today. But with the new government, we have new opportunities and the chance to make a real difference to the thousands of women and children who were wronged through no fault of their own. We have all the information we need, thanks to the amazing Baroness Cumberledge and our fantastic Patient Safety Commissioner, to ensure that scandals like these never happen again and that compensation is given to help those families rebuild their lives. So we now have to act, as others have said, and I hope that today has highlighted the urgency of this to the Minister. I'm sure that it has, and that she will have the conversations she needs to make this happen, so that these wrongs can be righted at last and as soon as possible. And can I ask, if I may, Ms Furness, if members are willing, if they would all gather at the bottom of the stairs and join campaigners, perhaps for a photo to mark this occasion, and maybe spend a few moments talking to some of them. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the first anniversary of the Hughes reports on valproate and pelvic mesh. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. And to the contrary? The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order, the sitting stands adjourned.